It's good to see everyone this evening. Kind of a soggy night to be out, but glad you're here. Of course, I know some are away. We've got quite a few on the sick list not here, but we're glad that you're here. I'm sure you recall the words of 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8, where Peter says to be sober, to be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. And if you look at this passage, and this is one of these that we read over in our Bible reading, and we really don't give it a lot of thought or consideration as to what is being stated here, but basically Peter gives two inspired admonitions here in verse 8. First of all, he says to be sober. Now, he doesn't mean be sober here as opposed to being drunk. Not talking about that kind of sobriety at all. Actually, the word which is here translated sober, if you look it up, means to be calm and collected in spirit. It means to be temperate. It means to be dispassionate or circumspect. And I guess if we're going to paraphrase it, he's simply saying we need to be self-controlled. We need to have ourselves under control. And this is the same spiritual sobriety, if you will, that he talks about back in chapter 1 and verse 13, and then later in chapter 4 and verse 7. But more importantly, and this is the point I wanted to emphasize tonight, notice not only are we be sober, he says be vigilant. Now, why the King James translators chose that word vigilant, I don't know, because in virtually every other translation, you'll find that it is translated to be watchful, to be awake, to be alert. And that's actually the idea here of being awake or watchful. And as Christians throughout the New Testament, we are enjoined to be watchful. 1 Thessalonians 5 and verse 5. Paul there says, therefore let us not sleep as do others, but let us watch. And there's that word translated vigilant in 1 Peter 5:8. But let us watch and be sober. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 5, Paul tells Timothy, watch thou in all things. And then again in Revelation 6 and verse 15, inspiration says, blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. But of course the question arises, why is Peter giving this admonition? Why is he telling these Christians to be sober-minded? Why is he telling them to be alert, to be watchful? Well, he tells us here in the text. He says, because our adversary, our enemy, the devil, is out to destroy us, to cause us to be lost. And that's a lesson that we need to learn. And I've said all of that to get to the point. This is the actual point I want to get across. You know, we would never think of bringing a wild animal, a dangerous animal, into our home, would we? Now, I realize that rattlesnakes are not indigenous to Ohio, at least maybe in years past. But, you know, in North Alabama, we had some timber rattlers, and I'm not exaggerating. They were as big around as my arm, 4 or 5 feet long. We would find them when we would be out hunting or other things in the woods. You'd find these big timber rattlers. But, you know, I never took one home. I hate to think what my mama would have done to me if I'd taken one in the house. But I knew better. You just didn't take a rattlesnake into the house. What if you found a bobcat or some other wild animal? Would you take it into your home? Would you invite it in? I hope not. And yet, how many Christians invite something far more dangerous than a poisonous snake or a big cat that's aggressive? Invite something just as dangerous, in fact, more dangerous, into their homes. You say, what do you mean? Don't we sometimes invite Satan into our home? Not literally, not personally or physically, but think about it. When we turn on television programs with some of the content that's out there today, are we not inviting Satan into our homes? And it would be wrong for people of all ages, but especially if you have children, to invite Satan into your home in some of the television programs that are out there today. We need to learn to turn it off. Tell Satan, no, you're not going to be in my home. Some of the reading material, you know, just go through the checkout counter and look at the pictures, look at the headlines on some of the magazines. Why would we take that stuff into our homes? We're inviting Satan into our homes. And even if we can honestly say, well, I'm not affected by these things, how do we know that others in our family will not be affected? How do we know that we don't have visitors? Maybe a neighbor stops by, a coworker, or one of your child's friends stops by and they see these things. How do we know they're not affected? You see, we need to be careful about the things that we invite into our home, bring into our home. You say, well, it's just a television program, it's just a magazine, it's just pictures, or it's movies. Same way with movies. A lot of movies that are rated maybe PG-13 can be pretty raunchy. And some of the R-rated, far worse. And so we need to think about this. The things in our home are in much the same way as inviting Satan into our home. And he is out to destroy us, as Peter says here. Your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. Well, obviously, Satan's not literally walking around in the being of a lion. Satan is not literally going to devour us physically. How's he going to do it? Spiritually. At least that's his intent, to destroy us, to devour us spiritually. And he will use anything and everything within his power to cause us to be lost, whether it's television, whether it's movies, whether it's books and magazines, or any number of other things that he throws out to tempt us with. And sadly, rather than influencing the world, I'm afraid that the world has influenced us. We've gone along with the world rather than keeping the world out. I hope you'll think about these things. We need to think about not only our influence, our example, but how we're affected by the things that we're involved in and bring into our homes. But we're going to extend the invitation of Christ as we bring this devotional to a close. And if you're not yet a Christian, you can become one. We had 3 just last week put on the Lord in baptism, and we rejoice with them. And of course, we're told that the angels rejoice. And certainly there are others that need to make the same decision to put on Christ in baptism. If you're not a Christian, though, you can become one, coming in faith, repenting and turning from your sins, confessing that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and being baptized for the forgiveness of your sins, and let him add you to his body, the church. Or perhaps you've allowed Satan to pull you in the wrong direction. You need to make that right. Ask for the prayers of the church and ask for God's forgiveness. Whatever your need might be this evening, if you need to respond, will you come while we stand and we sing?